In 2024, India decided to do something huge. We're talking one of the biggest legal shakeups in its history, throwing out its old colonial-era criminal laws for a brand new set of codes. The goal was fantastic, to decolonize the justice system, to modernize it. But in trying to fix the past, it seems to have kicked off a huge debate about the future.
And that brings us to a really tricky question. What happens when, in the process of making things better, a new law accidentally creates a massive gaping hole, a void where there used to be protection?
So here's the heart of the issue. This new penal code, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, or BNS for short, it didn't just update the old British-era laws, it completely replaced them. And in that shuffle, a key legal provision, the one that was used to prosecute sexual assault against men and transgender people, it just vanished. Poof! Gone.
To really get what was lost here, we have to travel back in time a bit. We need to look at the old law, a very controversial, very famous piece of colonial legislation called Section 377. Section 377 was a relic. I mean, it dated all the way back to 1860, a direct import from the British. And the language was so archaic, so broad. It criminalized what it called carnal intercourse against the order of nature. For more than a century, this law was used as a weapon, especially against the LGBTQ+ community, to prosecute consensual relationships. But the story of this law is really a story of evolution. For most of its life, it was this oppressive rule. But then came 2018. A landmark Supreme Court case, Navtej Singh Johar versus the Union of India, changed everything. It was famously celebrated for decriminalizing homosexuality, a huge win for human rights. But that's not the whole story. The court did something else, something incredibly clever. You see, the court performed what you could call legal surgery. It didn't just scrap the whole law. Instead, it carefully cut out the part that was used against consenting adults. But it very deliberately left the rest. And what did that do? It transformed Section 377. This old, oppressive law was repurposed into a modern tool, a flawed one for sure, but a tool nonetheless, to prosecute non-consensual sexual assault against anyone, regardless of their gender. For male and transgender survivors, it became their only line of defense. That 2018 judgment was truly a watershed moment. And this quote from Justice Indu Malhotra, it just captures the weight of it all. It was the highest court in the land acknowledging a historic wrong. It felt like a massive step forward. But just a few years later, that very foundation was about to be pulled out from under everyone's feet. Which brings us back to the new law. Let's dig into exactly how the BNS defines sexual offenses, because this is where the problem becomes crystal clear. The devil really is in the details here.
Okay, look at this comparison. It is night and day. The old law, Section 377, was vague, right? Against the order of nature. But that vagueness made it functionally gender neutral. Now look at the new BNS. It is incredibly specific. It defines the perpetrator as a man and the victim over and over again as a woman. There's just no wiggle room. It leaves no space to include men or transgender people as victims of rape.
And this isn't just a one-off sentence. This idea is baked into the very structure of the new code. The whole chapter on sexual offenses is literally titled, "Of Offenses Against Women and Children." The entire legal framework is built around this idea, which means adult male and transgender victims are just written out of the picture. So the bottom line is this: when the old law book was thrown out, Section 377 went with it. And the new law, the BNS, didn't offer any replacement for that specific protection it provided. And just like that, a legal vacuum was created. For the first time in modern Indian history, there's no specific law that makes the rape of an adult man or a transgender person a crime.
Now, as you can probably guess, this did not go unnoticed. This omission has kicked off a massive, fiery debate, with legal eagles and human rights groups sounding some very loud alarm bells.
And critics are arguing this isn't some simple mistake or oversight. A publication called Feminism in India calls it a patriarchal byproduct. Their argument is that society, because of patriarchal norms, just can't seem to picture men as victims of sexual violence. It clashes with old-school ideas of masculinity. So by defining rape as something that only happens to women, the new law actually reinforces these really harmful stereotypes.
The international reaction has been even more blunt.
The International Bar Association published a piece with the headline that the new laws effectively legalize male rape in India. Now, that might sound extreme, but legally speaking, they have a point. If there is no law that defines an act as a crime, then you can't prosecute anyone for it. This whole situation is also being seen as a huge step backward because, well, it goes completely against what's happening everywhere else in the world. For years, the global trend has been moving in one clear direction, making sexual assault laws more inclusive. Just take a look around. The US, the UK, South Africa, Australia, the list goes on. All of these countries have been busy updating their laws to use gender-neutral language. Why? To make sure that absolutely everyone is protected. India's new code, well, it's swimming against the current. But hang on, because the debate gets even more interesting here. It's not as simple as just making the law apply to everyone equally. There's a really important bit of nuance that's being discussed, and it's the difference between a law being gender-inclusive versus being completely gender-neutral. Okay, let's break that down because it's super important. A gender-inclusive law is one that makes sure protection is there for everyone, men, women, transgender people, you name it. But a purely gender-neutral approach is different. It means you look at the crime without considering gender at all. And some feminist legal experts worry that could actually cause more harm. Here's the core of that argument. The unfortunate reality is that sexual violence overwhelmingly targets women, and it's often rooted in these deep-seated historical power imbalances between genders. The fear is that if the whole legal process, from the police station to the courtroom, becomes totally gender-neutral, it might just ignore that crucial context, and that could end up hurting female survivors. This quote from Feminism in India just nails it. The ideal solution, from this point of view, is to have a law that protects everyone, but isn't blind to the realities of gender when a crime is actually investigated and tried in court. It's a call for equal protection, without pretending that gendered violence isn't a real thing. So, with this huge legal gap and all this controversy swirling around, where do things actually stand right now? What happens next? Well, there are a few things in motion. First, the new law is already being challenged. A legal case has been filed arguing that this exclusion is totally unconstitutional. Second, we're hearing whispers from the government that, yeah, maybe this needs a second look, and an amendment could be on the table. But until then, survivors are kind of in limbo. Police might have to file cases under lesser crimes, like physical assault, which just doesn't capture the seriousness of what happened. And that really brings us to the central conflict of this whole story. India set out with a really noble goal: to break free from its colonial legal past. But in doing so, it has accidentally kicked off this massive fundamental debate about what justice and equality even mean in the 21st century. And it leaves us with one last really big question, and it's not just for India, for any society trying to change for the better. As we work so hard to evolve and fix the mistakes of the past, how do we make absolutely sure that a step forward for some doesn't become a giant step back for someone else?